Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. On this episode of Barkeep Upkeep, I'll be joined by Sequeira from SplitSecond. Sequeira and I will be discussing various topics related to cEDH for the purposes of clearing up any misconceptions about players who play cEDH, as well as giving advice to cEDH players and non-cEDH players alike. Hopefully our conversation is helpful in bringing players together as well as helping people be more accepting of each other and less intolerant. Before starting, I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me. If you'd also like to support me on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description. Patrons get early access to scheduled videos on YouTube, and high-tier patrons get access to the VIP section of my Discord server, whose link is also in the description. In fact, patrons get a chance to see this video earlier. So without further ado, here's the conversation. Alright, so we're joined here by Sequeira from SplitSecond. Thank you for being on the Commander Tavern once more.
Kirby, it's a pleasure to be here.
Alright, so I invited Sequeira over because we've had some discussions through Discord about how we're finding all of these, it's the talk of the town to say about casual or cEDH, or how some mentalities affect or they're bad or they're good for the format. But I think that we can all learn from this, and it's not just necessarily pointing fingers, you're like this, you're like that, but try and get a more harmonious mindset about everything, break a few misconceptions. But before we even begin, lots of people say cEDH this, cEDH that, so maybe you can help us understand maybe what is or what isn't cEDH.
Before even that, I think this is like you said, this is a great time for us to be discussing this topic, especially after the Rules Committee banned Flash, which was a ban aimed at the cEDH community, and it was requested by the cEDH community. So it's a good time to once again look at what we have in common with EDH players and what we don't have. Mm-hmm. cEDH, like you asked, cEDH is generally defined by the cEDH community as having the best strategies for winning and played with the best commanders for each strategy. I have a slightly broader perspective of what could be a good strategy or what couldn't, because I think the cEDH community sometimes closes itself in a box of goldfishing, that is winning around turns 2 and 3, and there are plenty of cEDH decks, even of the top tier ones, of the ones that are respected by the community, that cannot or will not try to win at these turns, something like Blood Pod or Opus Thief. Mm-hmm. And I believe that cEDH can encompass even more decks, even more so now that we have Flash out of the way. I think there are decks that can definitely stack and slow down the meta, and that they will start being recognized and absorbed into the cEDH mentality as well. Besides that, I think cEDH is basically EDH, where we have the same rules, we have the same mentality behind it. We like the EDH community, we are still trying to have fun, but instead of the EDH community that usually has fun with splashy plays, big spells, and the ride of it, the experimentation of it, cEDH the players usually like more the experience of overcoming the odds, of having 3 other people who are trying to stop them or get on top of what they're doing faster or smarter. And in the end, feeling that it's like a Dark Souls game boss, where you reach the end, you win, and you feel like you've overcome the odds, you've beaten, outsmarted, outplayed, outskilled other 3 players, and it's not at the expense of those players, which is one of the misconceptions. We are not trying to give a bad experience to each other. We're just using different tools or at times similar tools to get to the end game, which is winning.
Yeah, I agree. For example, I don't necessarily consider myself a cEDH player because I don't really build any cEDH decks. Well, I do brew some if I'm inspired by other channels or what people are doing, just to delve into it, but at least in real life I don't have one. But one of the things I notice, for example, when I see a lot of gameplay videos, is a lot of interaction. And for me, that's very fun to watch and to see other people at a table do. Sometimes you would see maybe 10 or 12 counter spells go off at once, and then, as you said, you are facing off against 3 other players. So do you have enough responses to maybe take on the entire table to protect your combo? So at least cEDH for me, because I'm not really a cEDH player, but I also don't consider myself a casual player. I do brew casual decks and every once in a while, and competitive decks, just because I have an idea. But at the same time, I'm able to understand that that particular idea I have will not work outside of a casual environment, or that particular idea is strong enough that it does fit within, what cEDH is. But most of the time, I'm always in between, but I'm a bit more semi-competitive because I do like interaction. And I think that what you mentioned about, playing a Dark Souls game that is very hard and that you're one person against 3, that's very important, because what I like about it is the interaction. Sometimes I see a lot of games and it's very exciting because you see a player trying to combo off, and then you have this stacks war, this counterspell war, where it's like 12 different cards are on the stack and people are trying to do timing, and one slight mistake might cost you the match. So I think that for some people that might not be fun, but in the same way, Dark Souls for them might not be fun. But that doesn't mean that Dark Souls is a bad game, or Dark Souls, ruins the fun of video games in general. I think people are too narrow-minded in that sense, that they're really quick to label something and then discard it just because it's not their kind of fun, or those opinions shouldn't matter. And that's why when you mentioned Flash being banned, that's good, because it's being recognized that there are different power levels to EDH, and it's not just, this is casual. No, it says it in the philosophy. It's for fun within what you and your play group agree is fun. The problem is when you have this difference in opinion clashing together, because you don't necessarily want to take, Thrasios Semtimna, level 10 deck and sit down at a level 3 or level 4 pod, that becomes a problem. But then that's something we'll discuss later. But at least I think we can agree, and other players also, that cEDH is high level, not to talk down to casual players, but it's high level because you're expecting those fast decks, you're expecting those really grindy decks, you're expecting, those really savage decks that, try and make miserable for other people, quote unquote, in the sense that it makes it more harder for you to win. So you're trying to solve that puzzle. Okay, how do I win with what my opponents are doing for me?
That's definitely a part of it. I think one of the things that both helps EDH in general, as in cEDH and EDH, is having the rules committee with the document that speaks of the spirit of the format. Yeah. But it's like a lot of official documents, or something like I want to say a religious document, where people will at times weaponize it and use it or take it too literal, and not really see that there's space for both even in this document. I actually read it before we did this this podcast, and the only thing that people could claim that is something against cEDH is a sentence where they say that EDH can be broken, but they think it's more fun for that not to happen. But not even this can be actually used against cEDH, because for us, we sit at a table, and for us, the broken things, the breaking the format, is the fun thing, and we are all agreeing on it. So even if the rules committee does not says that it's more fun if you don't do it, they're not saying that if you think it's fun and if you do it, and if the others agree with it, that you shouldn't do it anyway. So there's space for everyone, for sure.
Exactly. No, and for example, there's a whole bunch of 2-card instantaneously I win combos in casual in a more casual deck or less competitive deck, to put it that way. So it's also, you have to get off your high horse on both sides of the argument that why is one 2-card combo bad or unfair versus any other 2-card combo? Why are some infinite combos quote unquote fun but others aren't? I think you're splitting hairs at that point, because the rules committee ban things. When they make bans, it's about the notion of fun or fairness. For example, the Iona ban, I can understand why they banned Iona. I can understand why they banned Flash, Sylvan Primordial, all these things. But at the same time, a lot of times a new card comes out and people are like, oh, this is broken, this is busted, but not really. It depends on how it's used. So more often than that, yeah.
I was just going to say, like Brandon's Magistrate, which has a lot of people requesting the ban.
Yeah. In that case, for me, I see combos from a very broad perspective. If I want to play infinite combos, I will. If I don't want to play infinite combos, I don't. But you can't get mad at the person who does run them, because at the end of the day, it's illegal. If Armageddon is legal and I'm playing mono white and that's what I'm going to do to get ahead, because the green player has a lot of lands, but they don't have a lot of artifacts, and I have a lot of artifacts, that's my ramp, setting everyone back. Is it a bad experience for a lot of people? Sure. Maybe you want to tell other players, look, this deck does this and does that, but at the same time, players, if they get upset or not, well, that's a play group thing, but it's not banned. Like, those field baths shouldn't really exist unless the deck within itself, within all of its components, is doing something more competitive. And that's what I think cEDH decks do there. They're trying to maximize everything, be efficient with mana bases, be efficient with curve, be efficient with, one card not being narrow, one card trying to, to be able to do multiple things. So I think it just goes down to mindset, which is another question that I wanted to ask you also. Now that we know more or less that cEDH does fit within, the spirit of the Commander and what's fun for people, what do you think then how a player's mindset would affect, how they build decks in these formats? Like, for example, for what would a cEDH player's mindset be when they brew a deck or sit down to a table to play?
I'll start with your question, which is the cEDH player's mindset sitting at the table is to win, whereas an EDH player's mindset sitting at a table usually is to have fun. Not to say that winning can't have fun involved in it, but ultimately cEDH players try to make the most optimal choices in place, also to avoid not only suboptimal play, but also to avoid unnecessary conflicts within the group. Which is something that maybe EDH players experience more, where two players gang up on a third player without necessarily a major reason for it, and it eventually creates some attrition within that game. It can also happen in cEDH, but usually because we're trying to do the best play, at times we might disagree what the best play is.
Yes.
But ultimately, we know that the other player isn't trying to make things personal. And their mindset is also, when you sit at a cEDH table, you look at each commander and you try to understand, and you have a general understanding of what they're trying to do, what their win con is, what their major goal is, which creates expectations, it creates a game plan for you, and ultimately it also can lead to false expectations, or you can misjudge how strong a deck is, or you can also misjudge. You can look at a commander and assume they're going to do X, and they're actually trying to do Y, and they use that against you as well.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that come with a cEDH mentality.
Yeah, I think also, not to interrupt you outright, but
sure.
The term competitive to me, because I played Standard when it was like Type 1 or had all these, strange names a long time ago. But once a meta is established in a competitive format that can be Standard or Modern, part of your deck building has to also be assessing the meta. For example, if you're playing Modern and you're a competitive Modern player, like you go to tournaments and you're actually, going there to try and win, do your best to win, you're still having fun, because that's the point of going to tournaments, which is why for Standard also, it's not fun playing against the same deck in every round, which is why people ask for bans. But at the same time, if you're a Modern player competitively, you have to know the decks. You have to know Delve. You have to know Dredge. You have to know Affinity. You have to know all these decks. And the sooner you're able to identify them and play accordingly, those are all trying to optimize your play. You have your sideboard also. So I think also in that aspect, when you're playing competitive EDH, is when you see Thrasios and Timna, you already know more or less what it's going to do. When you see the mono green Selvala, when you see Yisan, when you see Kenrith, it's a bit harder because Kenrith can be played, different ways. But at least in that sense, it's also a factor that's not really prevalent in lower power. Even in semi-competitive, you can have a cEDH CDC, but at the same time, you don't know if it's Hermit Druid, if it's Necrotic Ooze, and then you have a less competitive CDC like mine. My CDC deck is not cEDH, it's semi-competitive, so you don't really know how to gauge it. If I see someone with Gahiji, Honored One, I really don't know what to expect. Maybe it's aggro, maybe it's zombie, it could even be Voltron. But I think that's another thing that sets cEDH out, is that you have to do a lot more research, because that also helps you win. It's not just the optimal plays. And I think that with a casual mindset, you're more worried or more focused on your own game plan. But in cEDH, you're more focused on other players' game plan also, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's definitely something that happens. And the politics that happen in cEDH differ from EDH usually because they're not as much as a plea, they're more of a fact. Like, this player will win next turn if X and Y happens. We saw him tutor for this, I'm tutor for that. This will happen. And sometimes we're wrong because the deck isn't playing like that. I'm saying this, and some cEDH players might be raising their eyebrows, but this is because I think that a lot of decks that are considered fringe or just high power, they can actually be cEDH if you gather the tools to fight the meta and gather the tools to subvert expectations and use those advantages to win the table. This is something that I do. Like, people watch split-second videos, they will see me play stuff like Aurelia the War Leader as a Boros commander, and I've won several tournaments with her because I use her specifically as an anti-meta commander, where people will not want to get rid of Aurelia. People will not want to deal with my stacks pieces unless they start to accumulate too hard.
Yeah.
And ultimately, people will also create negative expectations of me. I've had a player ask me as I entered the last table, so what did you win with the last table? And I said, I won with Aurelia War Leader. And he rose his eyebrows and looked at me like, what? And the fact that he underestimated me so much was the same reason why I killed him on the fourth turn, because he did not expect the aggression, the stacks, or the fact that everyone would be slowing him down along with me or interacting. And he brought a deck that was mostly just a cannon with little spares to deal with hate. And ultimately, I won that tournament, as I've won others, with this deck that people will definitely look at it and say it has bad pieces, it's Boros, it's this and that. And I'm not going to say that it will win each cEDH table at all, but I know for a fact that I can bring it to a cEDH table and perform well and be underestimated. And we have other example of that, like Heliod, which was brought to a tournament that was discussed on the internet a lot, and the guy got first place on that tournament. And it was the same thing. He brought 1 billion stacks pieces. He was underestimated because it was mono white. You had the cEDH communities trying to almost invalidate the tournament because of mono white, saying, oh, they didn't bring the right tools, or they underestimated him. Mono white cannot be considered competitive, etc. And now you have Heliod as a top tier commander, which is something that, if you ask the cEDH community when it started, the mentality would be a major no. And this is also part of the cEDH mentality, something we could discuss further, which is sometimes we are so used to sitting down at the table and assuming who can perform, who cannot perform, who can win, who can't, and who does what, that we ultimately almost stifle other decks or strategies from being recognized as cEDH.
Mm-hmm.
and we stop ourselves from growing even more, because diversity is something that the EDH community will always accuse us of not having, and this is not true. We have a lot of diversity. Of course, they will say, "Oh, but you all have Mystic Study, Mystic Rumor, etc." But we can say the same about the EDH community. You see a lot of suggestions like Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Vidal Canary. Like whenever I see a person on a group, a casual group asking for advice, you see these cards come up a lot. And I'm not saying they're bad or not judging. I'm just saying that these are commonplaces in EDH, just as you have commonplaces in cEDH.
Yeah, the staple.
This shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, exactly. They are called the staples. It's not a problem. The only thing is you think that EDH will always play out the same way, or it will always last 3 minutes. And you have to think about it. If each EDH table lasted 2-3 rounds and only 5 minutes, it would not only be boring because there is no challenge, but that would also mean something is inherently wrong. Why are these 4 players, why is the first player always winning? Is it because no one is running interaction or hate? That has to be it, because there are so many cards that say no, can't, don't, won't, that there is no way that every cEDH table would only last that time. And we have cEDH tables lasting 6 turns, 7 turns, 8 turns. We have our split-second games last for hours at times, because we're there not only trying to figuring the best way to show people the smartest plays, but there's a lot of interaction, and I think that's something that makes our games also fun. And it also made my game with the Commander Tavern, which wasn't as large, not large, but as at the top level, but it was still pretty high.
Exactly. And I agree with a lot of the
points. It made it interesting.
Yeah, of course. That the point you just made about interesting games, like it's what's interesting for one person might not be interesting for another person. But even though we played with decks that weren't so high powered when you came over with Luis to my channel, is that it was still a fun game and it still had interaction, and it was not a cEDH game. And likewise, when you mentioned about people's expectations are being closed off in a box, and how all these people, they raise their nose and they raise their eyebrows and they say, "Oh, that's not cEDH." But why? Who are you to say if it is or if it isn't cEDH? It's like I compare it a lot to playing chess. Chess has its openings and it has its established strategies, but that doesn't mean that one strategy is always superior to the other one, because then people would just only use that strategy and always win at a chess match. In chess, you have strategies and you have counter strategies. You just have to know, and the more strategies you know, the better off you are prepared. But at the same time, you can take risks, you can take gambits, which is, for example, when you mentioned a good point, which is this person might win next turn. Like, are you going to take the risk? You have to have that good threat assessment. So what makes a deck cEDH is how you play, how efficient you are with the pieces you're doing, and how competitive your mindset is, as well as your deck. And you mentioned the mono white deck Heliod for a tournament, but I also remember the Darien deck that won in one of your episodes of Split Second. I didn't expect Darien of all commanders to win, because it wasn't Heliod, it wasn't SRAM. These are decks you recognize, but it still won. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of things. And going back to the chess analogy, maybe in a grandmaster tournament, or a tournament with these high ELO score players, one small mistake can cost you the game. But maybe in games where you don't have such skilled players, one small mistake might not cost you the game. And I think it all goes down to also what you mentioned about expectations. When I brewed my deck for your channel, I was worried about, for example, is this deck powerful enough? Because I already had that expectation. And Kazura and Ukima, sure, a lot of people were saying right off the bat, "Oh, this is food chain. This is going to be like Prosh, or this is going to be cEDH." A lot of people saying, "No, it's not cEDH. It's just a flavor of the week because it's a new partner pair." But I really liked how the deck played out. And we played more games than the ones, you guys edited for the channel. And I also played other games with the deck to test it beforehand. But I can say it's cEDH because of how it runs and how I pilot it. But at the same time, I also built a less competitive version of it. I didn't make a video for it, but I did link it in that video to show, look, how you build a deck with these expectations. For example, maybe Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, maybe that's too fast a combo. So I made the deck more aggro than combo based. And even then, the deck I built was around certain other things and we can get into that later. But it's mindset is just so important, which is another thing, that you mentioned communication. A lot of people are very snobby, but at the end of the day, if you beat them, they can't say, oh, your deck is not cEDH, but your deck is, and I beat it. I won. Why is this not a cEDH deck? Because it's not an established deck. In Modern, you have your top tier decks. Sure, they have a high likelihood of winning, but every now and again, an unknown archetype comes and starts topping. So now people are more aware of it. Now people are saying, oh, that's not competitive. You can no longer say that. So I think it's all a matter of, people have to have a broader expectation, like a broader mindset. When you go to a cEDH table, it's going to be high level. You're going to be playing, one small mistake can cost you the match. But at the same time, you can't be narrow-minded and say, oh, that's not a competitive deck, like almost as if you're insulted that someone's bringing a Boros deck to a competitive table, and it should not be that way.
Yeah, they will also openly mock it even for Modern or other formats. Like if there's something different, even coming from respected brewers or respected players, if it's a lose-lose situation at times, because if you perform well, people will be like, "There's no way, it's because of sideboard and that." And sometimes that is, but the guy still used the fact that people weren't sideboarding against him as a tool to win with that deck. Mm-hmm. But if you lose or if you don't perform as expected, people will be like, of course, what was he thinking, etc. And that stifles the creativity behind all of these Magic formats. And I think it just hurts Magic overall. I also like that you brought up your game as an example, the one where we played at your channel, because from an outside perspective, people would say that Bralim and the Shark would win because it was the best deck out there.
Yeah.
In a Void, it was the deck that would combo faster, combo more consistently, had the most the most way to make use of passive stuff like card draw and all of that.
The more routes to victory also.
Yeah, they were the last to stand, because I chose them to be the last one to stand, because I knew exactly what the deck could do, and I knew that they no longer had a chance to stop me.
Yeah.
So there's more to it than having a fast combo deck or all of that. Even a person bringing a Boros deck or an aggro deck to a cEDH table, knowing fully well that they don't have combos or fast combos, as long as they have stacks pieces, they can count on the grind that will form somewhat to beat people with aggro, because one, people are usually packing less wraths in cEDH, and sometimes even less wraths if the format is something like Flash Ult. Even Monza said that combat is probably a more viable strategy now that games are becoming grindier. And people need to really start opening their minds to it, because otherwise they will still doubt the guy sitting next to them getting beat up and getting their pride or ego hurt for no reason. You have to have an open mind for these kinds of things and not be hurt or not taking personally. Not think that the guy, and not even be offended in that weird way where it's like, this guy used my thing against me, or used the format against me, or my expectations against me. How dare he? No, he was smart to do that.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good point that I want to elaborate more on is threat assessment. How threat assessment is curious, because you would expect it's the same game. Like, we're literally playing the same game, the same cards, but then that mentality transfers onto threat assessment, and how threat assessment is different throughout the spectrum. Like, for example, how you mentioned in how you play as a cEDH player, or at least sitting down with a cEDH mentality, because even our game, which you brought as an example, you left the deck you best understood for last because you made threat assessment. And I think that's something super important that a lot of players don't do. You mentioned how people take things personally, and at least from experience, because I've played a way more casual and less competitive games than competitive games. And I've had way more problems with threat assessment at casual tables than at higher powered tables. And I don't understand why, but now that you mentioned mentality, it makes most sense. A lot of people, they take things personally in lower powered games. Not necessarily that those players lack threat assessment or that competitive players don't take things personally, because they do, but then like you mentioned, they lose. And I think that's something really important. We played a game. I don't remember if it's one that was aired or not, but we played a game. Oh yeah, I think it was the one that was aired where I was friends with different people at the table hurting everybody else. But then when it came the point to making deals with someone, you didn't say, oh no, you helped Luis keep his oof, which kept my artifacts from tapping for mana, so I'm not going to make the deal with you. Because the deal had to be made. Like, Brawlin and Shabraz was going to win next turn. So we had to band together to prevent that from happening, because if I lost, you lost too. You didn't take it personal. And at the same time, I had made like a small pact with Luis, and he exiled my combo pieces, my synergy from the graveyard for no reason. Well, I can't say for no reason, but he knew it was the best thing to do at that point, even though we had allied temporarily and I didn't take it personally. I don't even think I attacked him at all in the game because he was so behind. But I've seen in casual games, players literally say, oh, I don't care if I lose if you lose. And because they took something personal, and that's what I like about a higher competitive mindset, in that if you're playing to win, you should let those things just slide. You can't take it personally. It is a game. Sure, you might get upset, you might get salty, but if it's something for mutual benefit, it should always be the best thing to do.
Yeah. About the play we did where I had to lose a creature for it, the only thing that I considered was not attacking as you suggested, because I had a Fierce Guardianship in my hand, and I considered that I could stop Bralim on my own. I ultimately decided to attack because just to reduce the margin of error, but I spent some time thinking I might not want to do this. What you mentioned about the taking things personally, I've seen these happen. I've seen at a tournament someone being very offended about a Grand Arbiter Augustine player having that deck, and ultimately decided to lose the table to kill the Grand Arbiter, knowingly that doing that would help someone else win the game. So this sometimes happens. For example, I will not thing that cEDH players will do at times is maybe cast Chain of Vapor and use it as a tool to force another player sacrifice a land to stop the player that they are meant to stop. This is a relatively common strategy in cEDH. This is something that I may or may not do, though. This comes to other things. I like being a wild card at my LGS and not being put into spots I don't like being put on. So there are times where I will knowingly not take the bullet for someone else and teach them that they cannot. This is something that I do. This might sound irrational for some cEDH players, and it's something that I would not do at a tournament with strangers, because what's the point? But at my LGS, it's a play group. It's people that I will play with many times, and at times I will do these seemingly almost random or suicidal plays or decisions to remove myself away from them in the future. So even this is like cEDH players will tell me that is not cEDH or not cEDH mentality, and I think it's quite the opposite. It's me thinking of future tournaments where I can get this screwed for being pushed into these boxes. And I know for a fact that some players at the LGS don't do that anymore with me, or don't like risking doing that with me, because they know that I might decide not to comply. Mm-hmm. And this is something good for me. Of course, this is also about mentality as well. That's why I address it. There are more choices beyond what people are trying to sell you as the only choice.
Yeah. I think it's also like a Machiavellian mindset also, where you're doing whatever it takes to win, but at the same time, people think that having that kind of Machiavellian mentality is being a toxic player, and I disagree. Being a toxic player is consciously making the experience bad for everyone. You doing those kinds of plays, sure, that person might, feel bad that you did that dirty, underhanded thing, but at the end of the day, if that's the best play, they can't really take it personally. But like, for example, ganging up on somebody purposefully or headhunting because, you have this beef you want to deal with, or you're out for blood. That's something that's toxic. But if it's the best play and you're able to understand, okay, yeah, this was the best play, I can't take it personally, then fine. Or, if someone breaks a deal or does other things, then it's understandable because, toxicity could be different for some people or for others. But to me, at least, if you're playing optimally, I cannot take it personally because I should be doing the same thing. I should be playing just as optimally. Maybe I don't want to do that chain vapor type situation, but at the same time, it's like, why should I be the only one losing a land? You lose a land too, and then we deal with the problem. So if someone did that to me, I'd be like, okay, that was dirty, but I get why you're doing it. And I think toxicity in cEDH is all the things that we've mentioned, having that bad attitude, doing things just out of spite. But at the same time, what casual players need to understand too is that toxicity is not just with cEDH players. Like, for example, cEDH players, you have these really snobby, toxic players. But for me, the kind of toxicity you can find in casual players is all these players who are whining all the time, just incessantly whining. And I think the problem with whiners, or their faulty logic at least, is that if you interrupt and disrupt their quote-unquote fun and wacky and casual deck and in the spirit of the format combo or strategy, etc., you're ruining the format. Because basically with that logic, you can't disrupt the player's quote-unquote fun. So what do you have to do to prevent them from winning? Well, you eliminate them from the game. Like my favorite elimination, right? Player elimination. But then targeting and singling out a single player is also quote unquote against the spirit of the format. So as a player, what does this lead me? Well, since I can't kill you first and I can't interact with your quote unquote fun at all, then I have to win before you do. But in order to do that, I have to run faster mana and faster combos, but then doing so means that I'm running a stronger deck and pub stomping. So the problem with toxic casual players is that no matter what you do, if you win or if you prevent them from winning, it's not in the spirit of the format, but you have to make up your mind. So if you're playing for fun and you want to assemble this 13 card combo, that's fine, but protect your combo. Don't get mad because I casted this enchant, or I mutated Gem Razor. Actually do something about it. Run a counterspell. Like, there's no reason for you not to run negate. Negate costs a quarter, maybe less. You don't have to run Force of Will or Mana Drain. Like any kind of response, you have to protect your decks. Like, fun shouldn't be you just sitting there and expecting the table to just let you win. Similarly, in competitive format, you can't just expect one player to do everything. You have to, have your resources. And if you're too far ahead and the other players stop your combo, you shouldn't get upset because this fringe deck that you didn't expect to appear beat you. Like, you can't let your ego be affected. So I think toxicity is all around, just because toxicity isn't inherent to a format. Toxicity is inherent to a player. You can have that toxic casual player and that toxic competitive player.
Yeah. Or a thing I wanted to add is that if you're bringing a deck to a cEDH tournament that does not interact, and you're doing that knowingly, that's also a valid position to take. But you cannot be mad if people stop you or if you have no say in someone else winning before you.
Yeah.
Some of the things you said actually bring me to topics I wanted to bring more at the start of the discussion, but I didn't. One of them is that, so they will tie in. One of them is that neither me or Kirby are like these elected officials from cEDH community or the casual community, and we're here bringing you the rules or the ultimate opinions on these subjects. This is something that I would like people listening to consider. there will always be people telling you things to do or things to think, and these will eventually seed into some attitudes. Like, I don't think players turning to a cEDH player saying you're nasty, you're against the spirit of the format, etc., are people who read the rules and decided that instantly. I think it's something that playgroups end up cultivating, and sometimes it also makes some of these people on the playgroup feel like they will be ostracized or not fit in if they do not repeat these things. I think that the most important thing for cEDH and EDH players in general, and people in general really, to have critical thinking. Listen to these opinions, listen to all the opinions around, but ultimately form your own, make your own mind. Don't even if you're agreeing with everything that me and Kirby are saying, do that critically. Make sure that you are aware that you are agreeing because it resonates with the way you think. And if you think we're not addressing this subject, or if you disagree, that's also good, but that's not a reason to stop listening and hearing other opinions.
Exactly. That's why I brought you over, not because I consider you like the epitome or the paragon of what cEDH is, but because I've seen you play other kinds of decks that aren't necessarily cEDH, and I know you can brew decks that aren't higher power, but it's because of your mindset that I wanted to bring you over, because for me, the purpose of this video isn't so much so like scolding people or telling them they're wrong or telling them they're right, but sort of to open people's minds and to expand their mindset in that if you think something is casual, that's okay. Or if you're, restricted by what your playgroup does, or if you feel a certain way. But what I do know for a fact is there are toxic elements throughout everything, but you can't associate it to the game or to how the game is played. You have to associate it to the player, and you have to communicate with that player. If it's a toxic player in your play group and you have no choice but to play with that player, let that player know, like, I'm not forced to play with you, and you're not forced to play with me. If you can't bring a good experience overall to the table, then people are just going to stop playing with you. So it's about, a communication also, and, the maturity of a player. If you're a player and you take everything personally and you get salty all the time, then that's not necessarily a problem with the cards the other players are playing or what the other players are doing. You might have to do some introspection also, because five players being wrong and you being right, it's not always wrong, but at the same time, you might want to, think about it a little bit more. What is it that's ruining your experience? Is it a player who says, oh, don't worry, this deck is casual, but it's not? Or is it a player who says, oh, this deck is competitive, that's not competitive, I'm not going to play with you because you're not at my same level? There's just so many different ways for someone to ruin another player's experience. And I think at the end of the day, it's just about, expanding your mind, gaining a little bit more maturity, empathizing with people around you, communication, all those things. So there aren't any golden rules. It's just what's in your comfort zone to do. That's what you should try and go for.
Yeah, we even spoke about playgroups, about how some playgroups don't like mass destruction, and it's your prerogative to play. It's also the playgroup's prerogative to ultimately decide that they don't want mass destruction, and there are groups that do that, or they don't want infinite combos. Just make sure that you are not agreeing because you're being pressured into it.
Exactly.
Just make sure that you are comfortable with it. That's what we're trying to say. Because I think you and I have nothing against playgroups making their own rules. It's part of the format. It's okay.
It's rule zero.
It's just what we are against, and this is what people should understand, is intentionally making a bad experience for someone when the playgroup has not stated that this will not be accepted and this will instantly create a bad experience. Like if I'm sitting at a table and no one told me that we're not playing infinite combos, there is no mass level destruction, etc., and I play those, and you instantly gang up on me or give me a bad experience, that's not part of the spirit of the format at all. I didn't intentionally do this to go against you. I just wasn't aware of it. So sitting at a table, cEDH, EDH, high power, whatever it is, especially for new people, make sure that they know what they are expected to bring at some level. And if they didn't, maybe you have a spare deck, or maybe you are okay with trying it out, and if it doesn't go well, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
That's all okay. Just be mature about it, really.
For my play group, my Zurgo deck, I think I showed it in my 100th video. I haven't used that on the channel yet because I know, at least within my play group, how oppressive that deck is. And like the inside joke is that when I take that deck out is, okay, everybody has to more or less take out their best deck or a deck that can be resilient against it, because it is a really strong and a really oppressive deck. And my Brago deck is the same. My Brago deck, I use it to more or less gauge the waters. If I'm going somewhere new, I usually bring that one, because if people don't say, oh, this is a casual, this is not casual, I can use Brago in whatever circumstance. If I see that the game's more at a more casual pace, I won't play like the really oppressive stacks effects in the deck. They're basically dead draws. But at the same time, if I see players going off or that it's a higher power, okay, now I'm going to play Stasis. Now I'm going to play these things if it's with new people. So I already know more or less my expectations, at least when I'm playing with friends or with play groups, or I go to an LGS and I know how people are. Likewise, if I see that player who's pub stomping, who says, oh no, this deck is casual, but then the deck's running, all these hyper competitive combos or really fast combos, or they're running, free spell casting, or if they're playing time magic and taking extra turns, and the rest of the table, they're not doing that, then you're not playing a casual deck. You're lying to these players, and to do what? To just win and get it out of your system. So, at the same time, you have to keep it real. You have to have those expectations. Communication is very important. It's not that you're going to give a deck list to everyone at the table. Oh, look, here's the 100 cards in my deck. What do you like? What don't you like? So I can take it out. Not to that extreme. Yeah. But you should more or less know what to expect from your own deck. You brewed it. You tested it. You played it. You should know how it runs. You should know if it's fair or not against, in certain types of situations. So don't be that person who just doesn't care. But likewise, if you're an established play group and someone in your play group wants to do something differently, don't shun them. Don't treat them like a pariah. Be open also to different combos, to different decks, to different things you want to do, because otherwise it just becomes stale and boring because everybody's playing the same types of decks.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, even I'm getting a bit lost here. I wanted to backtrack a bit into these expectations, because even the way that the mindsets evolve and the playgroups evolve, this is ultimately something that happens within playgroups. Like, playgroups usually start getting higher powers and higher power level, and then that's when they start regulating things and deciding what is and what isn't okay for their playgroup. This is also something that I wanted to bring for the difference between cEDH and EDH, because people will also say that cEDH isn't EDH because we break those regulations or we go past those regulations. We don't break them because we all agree with them. And I think it's perfectly natural for playgroups and for EDH to have evolved into having a competitive scene. And this is something that I wanted to bring as well. Yeah, I was going to say, Monsters talked about this in a cEDH clarification video, which I think you guys should look into as well. Magic started as a casual game itself. We have a lot of stuff that started as a casual thing, as an experiment. Even Hearthstone, this is an example that Mons brought. Even Hearthstone started casually, and then we had people requesting for a competitive scene. So it's natural for Magic, having progressed and evolved into these formats, these competitive things, and having people who are interested in them and think they are fun, as it's natural for EDH to have progressed into something as well. Not progressed, more like evolved and sprouted these people who have interest in this type of EDH. I'm not saying that cEDH players want ultimately to convert every single EDH pod into competitive. That's not our goal at all. That's not the goal of cEDH. The only thing that matters is that cEDH should be accepted and should remain accepted, and ultimately seen as a valid way to play EDH. We're not even out there requesting like separate. Some people will be, but we don't really want separate ban lists. We don't want necessarily wizards to decide now EDH is an official format and we're going to have rules and ban lists and all of that specifically for competitive. That's not something that
It just makes no
just
sense to do so. Yeah, what you brought a lot of points. For example, Mons has a great channel, cEDH TV. I watch his content all the time, and I think that all the pointers he has given, even though it's more to how to get into cEDH, or if you're already a cEDH veteran, but I apply a lot of what he says also as a semi-competitive player. You know, politics, which is very important, or, you know, the efficiency of the cards you play. Those things, he really makes it known how important it is in cEDH, but I think it's more broader, and maybe he does or he doesn't realize it, but that can also be applied to everything else. How you politic, how you make threat assessments, you know, the efficiency of the cards you're running. And I think another important point you made was about the cards that are included. People say, no, but they play these and those cards. They shouldn't play those cards. But at the same time, you aren't playing banned cards. That's why you guys, as a cEDH level, asked for Flash to be banned, because if it's not banned, it can be played, and you don't want it to be played. You guys aren't playing Moxes. You aren't playing, you know, Black Lotus. You aren't playing these banned cards. You're not playing Leovold. Like, you're playing with the cards that are already existed in the card pool, and asking for it to be separated. I don't understand why people are asking for it to be separated, because if you're a casual player, you're not supposed to be playing against competitive decks or in a competitive environment. So that shouldn't be a problem for you. Likewise, if you're a competitive player, it makes no sense to have a separate ban list, because it's the same game. It's, for example, if I took Modern and I split Modern, like, it's the same exact, like, from 8th edition up. But then I said, okay, this is a ban list for Modern Plus, and then this is a ban list for Modern, you know, negative, or Modern minus, or something. That makes no sense. Like, you'd end up making a new format, which is what Wizards did. They made Pioneer, but they only made Pioneer because of how expensive it is to play these top-tier Modern decks. But they didn't do it because casual Modern players are complaining about the ban list or about decks. No, because if you're a casual Modern player, you're not going to go into a hyper-competitive environment to face against all these really established decks. So it makes no sense to separate the format. What you have to do is you have to, like what we've been mentioning all this time, like, don't be that kind of player who has a really hyper competitive deck and sit down and play against other people telling them, oh, don't worry, this is casual. It's not. You know it's not casual. And if you're a casual player, and if you don't tell new players that you're playing against, look, as a play group, we don't like these kinds of strategies, then you can't get upset if someone casts a Jokal Hops on you, because Jokal Hops is not banned.
Yeah. You also reminded me of a few other points that I wanted to bring as well. One of them is that this is another misconception about cEDH, which is that the cards make the cEDH deck. So if you're sitting at a casual table and you bring up a mana crypt, people could be instantly offended that you brought this mana crypt, because that means your deck is cEDH. Not really. I don't even necessarily think that mana crypt is the best card to bring to a casual table, because I would assume that you are not running combos, or you're running inefficient combos, and combat will be the best way to determine who wins. And these games last like 10 turns, 14. They can last like a lot of turns. So if you're bringing a mana rock that puts you ahead 2 turns, but it still hits your face, and I've been hit by it like 5 to 6 consecutive times, I will be dying. Really
I've lost games to Mana Crypt, so I don't know. I think one of those misconceptions also is that people associate price with whether something is casual or not, and I couldn't disagree more with that, because I play Dispel, I play Negate, and those are really cheap cards, and sometimes you see cEDH matches and people are playing cheap things like Mana Tith, they're playing, you know, Dispel, they're playing Force Spike. These aren't really expensive cards, so price doesn't make it a competitive card. And even like everyone, I've seen so many people agree and so many people say, like, to paraphrase, you know, Josh Lee Kwai, he said in an episode of Command Zone, I don't remember well which one it was, but he made the comment that a GOAT tribal deck is definitely like a 2 or 3. I think it was in one of the many videos they've made about, you know, gauging the power of a deck. Go tribal. That's casual all the way. But adding mana crypt to it doesn't make it a 9 or a 10. If you're running Go Tribal, you want to try and have and be able to play it. Like, if a mana crypt helps your deck be faster, why does that all of a sudden make your deck cEDH just because it has mana crypt? Or if it has necropotence? In fact, there's a lot of cEDH decks that if you run necropotence, you're actually making the deck worse because it's triple black. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and you have, or your black is like the worst, like the color that has the least representation, and you're slapping this card that will make it hard to cast it and keep it. But that's another problem. I think that this is something that separates the cEDH community and the EDH community ultimately, which is sometimes it's not even about the budget itself. I think players can be afraid of running these cards because they will then assume that their deck is too powerful, and that's really not true. I don't think EDH players should be afraid of having a deck that is focused on synergy, on fun, on big spells, and at the same time trying to make sure those are the most efficient as possible. I think we could address this further along the line, but that's a thought that I want to put out there.
I think that's very good advice, actually, for casual players, and maybe you can try and or I should say not try, but what other advice do you think you have for casual players, without sacrificing their own philosophy of what EDH is? Because maybe they might be so closed into being bombarded either by their play group or content creators or just the general stigma of things. But what advice can casual players gain from this that doesn't infringe or doesn't stain, to put it in an extreme sense, their philosophy on EDH?
Yeah, I think one of the things would be definitely separating price from card quality. There are a lot of, like, most stats decks in cEDH will have a lot of cards that are really cheap, and it's actually ironic that EDH players bring up the price tag thing when you have cards like Rise of the Dark Depths or Dark Realms, Vulcan Orrery. You even had Doubling Season and other cards that were exclusively played by EDH players, and they have the high price tag because of the high demand.
Exactly.
So it's kind of almost weird to think that Expropriate will be cEDH when I don't think any cEDH deck that I know of would play Expropriate. Just because it's a high price tag.
Exactly. And I haven't seen those cards that you mentioned in cEDH games, and I've seen a bunch of channels, because I like seeing competitive games, because since I don't play them and my play group isn't competitive, if I want to get that fix, I have to see other people play. And I've never seen, in a competitive pod, someone drop Doubling Season or someone drop Vedalken and Ori. You see in a lot of casual environments. So definitely don't be afraid. Like, if you have the disposable income, don't let other people make you feel bad for the cards you buy, because at the end of the day, it's your money, it's how you want to build the deck, and even then you can trade it off later if you don't need it, because it's a high-end card and you might get other cards for it. So I think that's definitely good advice, that casual players need to understand that price doesn't make a card or a strategy competitive or not.
For a deck, yeah. And if you're afraid of running those cards because you can't afford them, or you can't run a deck that affords them, I think that you could look into asking your playgroup for a price range for the decks. But even before you do that, before you limit other players, I think you should look into your own decks and do the second advice that I have, which is making sure that each card you have is the best you can afford for what they are doing.
Exactly. So
maybe you can reach a budget deck, a cheap deck that still has all these synergies you're looking for. It still goes towards this strategy, this idea, this concept. But you're not intentionally watering it down because you're afraid that the playgroup will think this is too strong. I think that these are two separate advices, but they're important advices. I don't think playgroups should be pressuring the players into being afraid of the power of their decks.
Yeah.
As long as the power of their decks fulfills certain expectations, like they're casual, they are going for ideas, etc. And I think that you should not be afraid to look up and ask players, be them cEDH or EDH players, for advice for better replacements to these cards that you think are underperforming, or maybe there are better options. You shouldn't be afraid of getting them or running them, because a lot of them will still be cheap. it's not going to be outside of your price range. And I don't think fear itself should have a place in your deck building, really. You shouldn't, like, if you're being afraid of doing something or going somewhere, I think that speaks volumes about the pressure that your playgroup may be placing onto you. Yeah, and I think ultimately you need to discuss with the playgroup whether this is right or not. So because maybe everyone in your playgroup feels the same, and you're all self-imposing these rules that you don't even necessarily enjoy. You can have more fun.
Yeah, and I agree, because brewing, not that I want to sound fancy and saying like, oh, brewing a deck is like an art form, but it's an expression. Like, you're expressing yourself, whether it's like if you were writing something or, playing something, drawing something, like you're expressing yourself when you're brewing. And I think that's something people also forget. Like, if you want to make this really janky combo or you discovered this synergy and you want to show it off, you shouldn't be afraid to do so, because you are expressing yourself through the deck building and through the game. And I think you mentioned a lot of things. People should not be afraid to increase the power of their deck, even while they're remaining casual. And we've mentioned Mons before, but a lot of ideas that I get from watching higher powered channels in the sense of their gameplay is, how can I improve as a player in assessing threats, in seeing when the best moment is? And sometimes when you're playing a game, since you're focused on your own things and what everybody else is doing, you might not see something. But if you see a game played online, you might see, but that was a mistake, or that was a really good move. And that also helps you improve your own game. And one of the things that I like about Mon's channel, he gives a lot of advice all the time from experience. And he also says, he has even made mistakes in his own plays, and he's pointed them out. I should have done this earlier, or that wasn't the correct time to do so. And I think that if your philosophy is, my deck is an expression of myself, that's okay. But you have to run responses. You have to run interaction, because that's not going to prevent you, or prevent other players, I should say, from interacting with your deck. And that doesn't make the other player mean from stopping you from having your fun. You can have a really synergistic deck, but if you're running green, at least run Beast Within or something similar, that to help you get rid of other things that are playing. So I think that casual players, they can continue with, what they like about the format and their philosophy on the format, because as you mentioned at the very beginning, it's not dogma. It is open to interpretation, and people shouldn't say, this is written in stone, this is law, it's my interpretation, or my way or the highway. But you can still have that same philosophy and improve your gameplay without necessarily pub stomping someone else or getting too far ahead in arms race with your playgroup. Something as simple as swapping out cancel. Cancel costs more than counterspell, and it does the same as counterspell. Counterspell is not an expensive card. Why are you running cancel? Run counterspell. Things like that doesn't ruin your philosophy. It makes you a better player. You have to be more efficient with what you're doing to improve your gameplay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, we're speaking a lot about power, and maybe people will be like, here's the cEDH player trying to make us power hungry or whatever. But ultimately, I think what you should realize is that there will be a lot of times, and I've read these in topics of Commander, because I'm in a huge Facebook group that's for all mentalities. And I see a lot of players saying that they are expressing in some way or another that they are frustrated that they feel like they are starting the game too slow, or sometimes they get a play and they get screwed, or someone gets even a stronger play. And sometimes just the -1 converted mana cost, which makes you faster. It also allows you to have interaction up. It also allows you to participate in the game and not feel like you're trading off playing your Avenger of Zendikar and getting toasted by a Wrath immediately after and giving you this feels bad moment. If you have a bit more of optimal cards at your disposal, it's not about power as in winning the game, as much as empowering you and giving you the ability to participate as well as do what you want to do. That's what we're trying to say. We're not trying to tell you, we're not trying to push you into this stairway where eventually you'll look up and you're like, wait, I'm at cEDH level. That's not like a goal here in any way. We're just saying that you can pick up your plan and you can take it further. This is something that for example, when you invited me to your play group, and this has happened to me at my play group as well. Sometimes people want to play casual or want us to play decks that aren't as strong, and sometimes I ended up winning anyway and feeling like I almost was oppressive. And if you look at my deck, there's nothing special about it. There's nothing like maybe it has a combo, but it's janky or whatever. I'm just not afraid of going all the way in the mid-range mentality. Like I will take cards like Mind's Dilation, which are not amazing for cEDH, but I will play it in a deck that tries to steal or gain advantage through other players. I'll play Emrakul, the Promised End. I will play efficient stealing cards that act earlier. I will look at the entire scope of the deck. I will pick powerful cards the same way. They're just not as efficient as they would be in cEDH. They aren't pushing the deck all the way, but they're still powerful, and they're powerful effects, and there are things that you want to be doing, from my perspective, in casual decks. You have all these time in your hand, so now you can balance out the early interaction, the early cool plays with having end goals like a 12 mana villain as well, which is like, it's a incredible, powerful thing to do, and it's really fun to do. And you shouldn't be afraid of having it in your deck. You can do it, and I think people will oftentimes be excited for you when you're doing these things, as long as you're not constantly crushing them or whatever. But you can balance out, and you can do what is ultimately the casual goal, which is to have fun and have splashy, fun plays by going all the way without being afraid. You know, as long as you're not saying this is casual because I have no tutors, but I have Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation, and ending the game like that. That is a sort of mix where you're bringing this super powerful combo into a casual shell and justifying it's casual because you don't have all the tools to make it consistent. But it's not even very fun. You can just have powerful cards, effects, etc., still have a cool deck, and still make sure that everyone is enjoying it alongside you.
But I think you brought a strong point in that if you're playing powerful, splashy spells, you have to also be aware that someone might do something against it. For example, if you entwine Tooth and Nail to get Avenger of Zendikar and Craterhoof Behemoth, you just invested a lot of mana. But if someone in response casts a Containment Priest, that's a really good move against it. Like, I'd be surprised, like, wow, you held that up all this time and you found the best possible moment to do it. Like, it's a feel bad for me, but at the same time, all right, let me see how I can recover from this, how I can do something about it. And your example with the Wrath of God, I just cast an Avenger of Zendikar, I'm going to have a whole bunch of plans, and then the turn passes and someone wraths the board. That's to be expected because that's the best move. Now, if you see that you have a white player and they've cleared the board before, maybe hold up a heroic intervention.
Yeah.
So you don't have to cast Avenger of Zendikar at that precise moment. And I think that's also, at least for me, like the last piece of advice I want to give to casual players without sacrificing their philosophy of EDH, because we've already mentioned before, just politics, not taking things personal. We've also mentioned improving their card quality, but I also want to talk about timing. Timing is also a very important factor. Like, just because you have the mana to cast something now doesn't mean you should cast it now. And I've seen a lot of blue players, they leave mana open, but they have an empty hand. Like, don't keep an empty hand. Like, maybe you drew a land, keep the land in your hand. If you have enough mana already on the table, keep a land in your hand, leave some blue sources open, because that alone might scare the other players into not casting something, afraid that you'll have a counter spell. So, yeah. So those are some things that, for at least from a cEDH point of view, that I've learned from seeing all these channels like yours, like cEDH TV, a lot of other channels, that is timing. Like, if sometimes I see when you mention, this is this person's opening hand, and then, okay, wow, they have a counter spell that opening hand, and then I don't see them use it right away because this situation didn't call for it, but then it came clutch at the particular moment where they had to cast it. So that's another thing, timing. You don't have to destroy everything the moment it's there. You don't have to counter every spell, that might be troublesome. You have to have good timing. You have to have that threat assessment combined with timing and the quality of your cards. and that improves your skill as a player without making your deck a cEDH deck or without making you a competitive player. It's just making you a better player. Not to be patronizing, because I want casual players to understand that you could be a casual player and at the same time be a very excellent Magic player. Being a cEDH player doesn't mean you're the best Magic player that can exist or the smartest Magic player. No, it's because of the deck and the environment you choose to play in. But you can be a casual player and make those smart moves, make those best moves, those really optimal moves. And I think that's something that casual players, like, they seem to forget, that if you're playing casually, you're supposed to make mistakes. No, making a mistake is not as costly as a competitive environment, but you should try and avoid those kinds of mistakes. For me, I think that also ties in together a lot of the things we've been saying. And for me, at least, that's like my last piece of advice for casual players, to not adopt a competitive mentality, but to use these techniques into your own game to make your game better without necessarily becoming a competitive game.
Yeah, and about timing, another thing that you didn't mention that is also timing is committing or overcommitting to the board, because sometimes you already have a winning board and you're still piling up these creatures and maybe not even saving interaction, and then it gets destroyed and you feel like, oh, I was ahead, I'm going to be behind for 100 turns. Maybe you could have avoided that. Like, some tables are just win more, some cards are just win more. You don't need to, even if it's funny, you don't need to go there. And the thing about interaction as well that I think people sometimes forget, like, seeing that, I'm going to be honest, like, if someone casts Tooth and Nail at my playgroup and someone else flashed in Containment Priest, we would, like, the player who cast Containment Priest would be like, oh no, but at the same time there would be a spread amusement and fun about it, about someone having something for that. It's having these pieces of interaction, protection, etc., like someone destroying all lands and you having Teferi's protection. It feels bad, but at the same time, everyone is somewhat amused that took place. It doesn't have to be a bad experience. It's great, actually. Usually, having interaction makes things more exciting. Like, what? Okay, this happened and it didn't go through. What will happen next? Like, there's a expectation and excitement. But yeah, I think we've went through a lot of advice that we wanted to give to EDH players. I think the last bit of advice, and this is more for people and not as EDH players, is there is absolutely no need, and we will talk to this for other problems coming from cEDH players, but there is absolutely no need to shame or mistreat a person because they play something you don't like or don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I have been insulted online for giving my views as a cEDH player on Mythic spoiler and all that. I've seen people say that cEDH players are not people. I've seen them insult people. I've seen them say that cEDH players basically painting us as villains and spreading this horrible mindset. And there are horrible mindsets from cEDH players that I will address once we direct ourselves towards them. There is no need to do that. You're just being toxic. You're giving a bad rap to the EDH community.
Yeah.
You're creating an us versus them mentality that does not need to exist. I love talking to new players. I love talking to players who only play casual. I like giving them advice. I love getting impressions out of them. I love helping them in their through their own scope. And I think that if you have nothing good to say, there is no need to say, really. You don't need to do that. And you don't need to pressure new players or newcomers into being like, this is EDH, it's fun if you are competitive, you are a horrible person, or you are not. There's no need for that, really. No need to be bad.
And it's a good point because, for example, you have your competitive play group, and I've seen competitive gameplay video on Monza's channel. I've seen competitive gameplay video on Playing with Power, Spike Feeders, casually competitive, the gamut, you name it. I've also seen other powerful games that aren't necessarily cEDH, like Affinity for Commander and MTG Month Sub. Just because those players and those channels or those play groups, those LGSs, what have you, just because they're playing really powerful games and really powerful decks, how does that affect me? I'm not in the game. Like, I don't understand how people can say, oh, cEDH is ruining the format. How? Just because you have a really powerful game on your channel means that automatically I'm going to have a bad experience. Like, I don't know how they can relate that. Like, I don't understand why some people are so bigoted in the sense that it's us versus you. No, it's not. Like, you're not going to a casual game and, you know, forcefully, consciously playing a powerful deck. You're not doing that. So, just because you're playing powerful games within your play group and you're all agreeing, all right, let's see what's the most powerful thing we can do or we can come up with. How does that ruin everybody? Like, I do not understand, like, at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's just inexcusable, honestly. Like, there's no reason. Like, even if I were to play the devil's advocate, to me, there's no logic behind it. You're just being a toxic person. Like, you're just insulting someone's opinions because of the type of deck they brew. That makes no sense. Like, honestly, to me, it's inexcusable.
Yeah. And that's another thing. Like, some players will maybe use the Flash ban as a reason why they don't want cEDH players around or anything. You should be mindful that Flash was banned as a request from the cEDH community, and that's true. We've been advocating it for ever since the Protein Hulk was unbanned. And if you look at it, Protein Hulk can still be somewhat problematic, and it's still a combo piece. And Flash actually brought variety to the cEDH community, like Flash Academy Red did. There was a lot of possibilities from Flash, but Flash was selected by the cEDH community after not me personally, but after the people from the cEDH community did statistics and tried to check out how much Protein Hulk showed up in EDH casual lists versus Flash. And Hulk actually showed up a lot more times than Flash as the value engine. So we picked the card that was the least likely to affect the EDH community. It had like a 0 point something representation with it, which is really almost negligible, really. Of course, some people were still affected, and it's not nice to feel like you still hit some decks, but at the same time, it was really necessary. It was something that we really needed, and we tried to make sure that it affected EDH the least possible. So there is no reason to be concerned that cEDH players will start requesting a billion bans one after the other. And the bans that we try to request, if they come around, they will always be thought out and mindful that we do not want to hit the casual EDH community. It's something we're trying to be the best we can and to not destroy your experience ever. And about this not being toxic thing, I think I want to expand this. I'm not targeting anyone in particular, but it's a responsibility that should also go to content creators on both sides. If you have content creators creating suggesting casual lists, playing casual games, etc., they should not, and it's really irresponsible to foster the same anti-cEDH mentality that is fostered by players across the internet and across playgroups. There is no reason for you to almost call to arms people or make them or validate their toxic behavior towards cEDH. And the same thing goes to the cEDH community. There is, I think the best way to bridge our advice into the cEDH people would be to bring the topic of toxic cEDH players. There is no reason for cEDH content creators or cEDH players in general to belittle, to ridicule, or to insult EDH players who enjoy casual decks or enjoy casual strategies. There is absolutely no reason, and it's completely inexcusable. If you don't think a deck is up to par, or if you think that it's never going to be cEDH level, your only duty here is to tell the player what could be the best cards for them to put to their list if they are open to that, and that's it. You're not there to call the deck trash. You're not there to say it's never going to be cEDH. That is not your role. It's not what you've been called to do, and it's completely inexcusable. And I find it offensive to see people who do that because it's toxic behavior. You should. And another toxic behavior we spoke a lot of times of is self-entitled cEDH players, because to me they can't be cEDH players, going to a player pod that is vocally casual, bringing their canyon to a sword fight. And I'm not trying to belittle the EDH community, just comparing the power level, crushing them and feeling really great about himself, and then going like, "Oh, this is not competitive," or "Oh, I thought your decks were better." Dude, if you knew this was going to happen, and if you just wanted to feel better about yourself, you're not a cEDH player. cEDH is first and foremost about the challenge. It's about winning against all odds. It's about having fun, winning against the best of the best. So you cannot even put him on a cEDH as someone from the cEDH community, because what they're doing is just being toxic. That's basically it.
Yeah, definitely. It's like if you play at your level, like even in like martial arts tournaments, like you have the black belts in the same, in the same league and the same ranking, and then you have lower belts. Like you're not gonna have a black belt go against a white belt. That just doesn't happen. It's obvious what the outcome's gonna be, but people just need to be more understanding. Like it's called Magic the Gathering, not Magic the Separating. Like if you have your, you have your mindset, and if you personally only like to buy cheap cards, you have no reason to insult the player that has more expensive cards than you, because just like you made the choice to not spend a lot of money, they made the choice that they do want to spend a lot of money. So who are you, to insult them? And likewise, if you do spend money on your hobby, don't be insulting to players who can't play it. Oh, like this cheap deck, like you really think you're going to beat me? Like both sides of the coin can be equally toxic. And I think that's a takeaway that players need to understand also, to just be more understanding. Like if you don't like that player, don't play with them. But don't think that one player makes the whole thing a stereotype. Like not all cEDH players are like that. Just like I know not all casual players are players that are whiny or sensitive. It's both sides have the same stereotype, and you have to be more accepting. Not every casual player is like that, easily offended or upset about everything. And the same way, not every competitive player is a pub stomper. Like you can have toxic environments on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. And after that, I wanted to bring other advice to the cEDH players as well. This one is also valid for the EDH players, which is if you have someone new, someone starting to learn, be accommodating. Like you shouldn't immediately push them into a box of what they want or don't want to play. The thing that I really love about my LGS is we do have tournaments, and it's the main way we gather, but whenever a new player comes around, we make a point to talk to them a bit after a game or during a game or before a game. Like, what is their expectations for their deck? What is their price range, maybe? Here are some cards you might like. Here are some cards you might not like. What do you want to do? And they say, I want to do this and all of that. And maybe in my mind I'm going, that's not like the best optimal thing to bring to a tournament. But it's not my place to be like, no, that's jank. Don't. No, I'll be like, these are the best options that I think are for what you want to do. You should look into them, maybe order, etc. And it's a joy to watch these players grow. It's a joy to be playing with a guy that I thought would only bring casual cards, and he's playing a semi-casual deck, and suddenly he casts a Rurik Thar, and me and the other combo player are like, oh, this is gonna suck.
Yeah.
And the guy came to the conclusion that this hate card is good after playing with us, after seeing that interaction is good, that hate is good, and it works. So it's a joy watching players blossom, and I think that both cEDH and EDH players should enjoy this instead of trying to push someone into playing this or that, like being immediately, oh, you're gonna like Nekusar or whatever. Just let them have their own pace. Just help them along the way. Be nice.
Yeah, I think that's good too. And now that you mentioned the advice for cEDH players, I think one piece of advice, and not that I'm a cEDH player, but I've played more or less enough to know at least the basics of how things run, that a lot of cEDH players who are, either starting out to play more powerful things or they're paying too much attention to what other people are playing, is that not every card that is in a cEDH deck is a cEDH card. Likewise, not every combo needs to go in every single deck. Like you would not believe the amount of times I see a quote unquote cEDH list for a particular commander, and just because the deck is blue aligned, they have the disruptive scepter combo. Like, but you don't have anything that requires infinite mana. Like, why do you need infinite mana? Those are two cards that are taking up a slot in a deck, or a four colored deck, and they have Necropotence. Do you know how hard it's going to be for you to cast Necropotence?
Yeah, you can have those if you have if it makes sense in it. I think that's one thing that people are starting to get into cEDH, and even some cEDH players for a long time do, which is they immediately slap in all the combos or a lot of combos into a strategy. And this ties in with another advice that I wanted to give cEDH players, which is explore more, because I am exhausted of these lists, these tier lists, where I get excited about seeing like a cEDH list for Omnath, Locus of the Royal, which is the Temur one, I think. I could be wrong, but and I go there like, what did they do to make this a cEDH list? And it's basically a food chain list that could fit any Temur commander. For that matter, like even Maelstrom Wanderer or whatever, it doesn't play to the strengths of the commander. And this is something that I can fault a lot of cEDH players. There are, like, you're a cEDH player and you know that the mentality is the best cards for the best commanders. So if you're playing a food chain list, there are already established best commanders for the food chain lists. So there is no need to slap a Omnath into a food chain list unless you're going to play to other strengths that Omnath brings.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot, bringing a commander that is inherently not the best for food chain, and not even using what makes him unique, what makes him strong, maybe. And this is applicable to a lot of lists. Like if you're picking up a list and you're trying it on a new commander, or even if an old commander. Yes, you should start by win cons. Yes, you should look into what is the best way to win with this commander. And then you should look into tutors, card draw, the best interaction, etc. But you should always make sure that there is enough space for those cards that really shine uniquely with that commander. Because that will be what differentiates you, what surprises other players, what makes the commander shine over another commander in the same color identity using the same win con, etc. That is the way that you really get the best out of that strategy. And another thing that I think that cEDH players should stop doing is use gold fishing as the only way to consider if a deck is cEDH or not. I know that not all gold fishing speed is used as a way to know if this deck is cEDH or not, but it plays a bigger part than I think it should play. Like, the reason why people say Boros is trash, and then suddenly Zerda comes along and people are like, oh, here is the only possible cEDH Boros commander. And I bring Boros a lot because there's a lot of stigma about it, and I've played with it a lot. People decided that Zerda will be the only viable option for Boros because it can combo. Or it can combo with cards that are below 4 CMC. Mm-hmm. That does not make Zerda a good commander necessarily. Zerda has a lot of fragilities. She will struggle a lot against a lot of hate based. It will struggle a lot against hate and stacks based decks because you're trying to slap this efficient combo into colors that aren't super efficient with it. Like, you need Zerda, you need a Basalt Monolith, and you still need a card that pays off with infinite mana. Whereas something like Kinnan gives you the same, except he is also an outlet. And if you're looking at Boros, you can't just look at Boros like, oh, it doesn't combo, and the only one that combos is Zerda, and she's not that great, so Boros is trash. No, you need to look at Boros like, what are the strengths of these colors? And the strengths of colors like Boros are, it has white. White has the best hate in the format.
The stacks, removal.
It has stacks. It has Massland Destruction. It has efficient combo strategies. You can make This is why I have Aurelia, the War Leader, as a commander. She gives me double the combat triggers. She gives me double the value for combat, and at the same time, I can play Blood Moon and Moon effects, which are stronger now that Flash Oak is out of the business. She lets me play even Mind Sense and Drenith Magistrate with Uba Mask. She lets me have a lot of hate-based strategies. It allows me to have protection like Eerie Interlude, and it also allows me to combo with her if I do happen to cheat in Helm of the Host.
Exactly, with
And
Photo.
This allows me to make Aurelia a cEDH commander. You may disagree, and that's okay. But are you disagreeing because you think it's still too slow or too bad or unviable, or are you disagreeing just because I cannot combo on turn 3? You need to open your mind to that.
Yeah, that's a really big point. When I made the Kazura and Ukima list, I think that was around the time that you suggested I played with you guys, but at least play like to record for the channel. And I did no research on Kazura and Ukima because it was a brand new commander. I wanted to see what list I could make. And I knew right off the bat, this deck has, its flaws, it's telegraphed. You guys are going to know its food chain, so what can I do about it? And one of the things I considered was, okay, it's a cEDH game, but that doesn't mean I'm only going to run low-costed spells. And I had two different ways of winning. I had food chain, obviously, but then I thought, okay, if I'm running food chain, how can I work with food chain in case my commanders cost so much that I'm not able to do it? Because Ukima on its own, if you bounce it or exile it or flicker it a bunch of times, it is going to get the job done also. So it's not just food chain. That's why on my list, you see some ninjas as support. And I think you mentioned it during the game when you saw some of the ninjas get exiled by Tainted Pact, is that, oh, that's interesting. But then you realize, oh, he can use that not just to bounce Ukima, but to bounce Thassa's Oracle as well in case something happens to it. But notice that the ninjas in the deck do double duty. And then at the same time, those are ninjas that when they give damage, I draw cards. So they're doing triple duty in the deck. And then a lot of people, they just say, oh, well, or have commented, oh, but you're missing some cards. I'm like, all right, like what cards am I missing? Oh, like what about Ad Nauseam? And I'm like, I can't run Ad Nauseam because I have a lot of cards in the deck that are expensive. And if I dig too deep with Ad Nauseam, I'm going to lose a lot of life. And at the same time, Ad Nauseam puts cards in my hand. I don't want them in my hand. I want them in exile so I can use Food Chain. That's why I ran Tainted Pact and I ran Demonic Consultation, but I did not run Ad Nauseam. I didn't run Necropotence because how is Necropotence going to help? It's triple black. It's going to be really hard to cast. Even then, that first game that I won, I got lucky because I was able to use Food Chain to get the double boost for Thassa. But I wasn't, it's all these things. It's all these pieces that go together. You can't just slap a whole bunch of combos together and call it a day. Like, sure, I was running Demonic Consultation and Thassa's Oracle, but Demonic Consultation on its own works because if I'm looking for Food Chain and I exile, the two creatures I need for Food Chain, then I just doubled the value with Demonic Consultation. Same with Tainted Pact. If I exile everything until I draw Food Chain, I did myself a favor because now everything's already exiled. So I think it comes to a point where what do you want to do with your deck? You can't just say, oh, I have the appropriate colors, I'm going to put all the combo pieces and I'm done. And I think that's something that cEDH players or novices at cEDH need to understand. Like, I'm not a cEDH player. I don't consider myself a cEDH player or a pro on cEDH, but I know deck building. I've played enough games of Magic in competitive environments to know the mistakes I have to avoid. And then playing games, I realized, okay, this works or this doesn't work in a deck. You have to play it. You can't just see a list and say it's trash. Like the Aurelia example you use. How can I just see the list and say it's trash? Did you even try it? You also can't say a deck is trash because you made some sample hands in a deck building website and you didn't like your sample hands, so the deck is trash. Like, no. Like, did you play the deck? Are you playing it in an appropriate meta for you to know if the deck is good or not? You can't just judge a deck by its cards. You have to judge a deck by the strategies in the deck, how the player is playing the deck. And even when I make my deck tech videos, I put a lot of emphasis on this is how I would build these commanders or this particular commander. These are the cards I'm running and why I'm running them. I always explain the strategies of the cards I'm running so you can understand. I'm not just putting a bunch of popular cards together. And sometimes I do put a lot of fringe cards in it, or a lot of cards a lot of people don't know because I've played the game long enough to remember a bunch of old cards or a bunch of niche cards that work together. But as you mentioned, why just run the same deck? I could have run CDC, Food Chain, or Prosh Food Chain, or Corvold Food Chain or First Sliver Food Chain, but I wanted to see, okay, do these new commanders, are they going to be a breath of fresh air in cEDH? Because I also notice a lot of channels that are cEDH, they have the same commanders also. Like, sure, you have good gameplay videos, but out of 10 videos, maybe back to back, 5 of them have Kenrith, or 6 of them have Timna and Thrasios, or Thrasios and Battle Smasher. And like, okay, sure, you are playing high-powered decks, but where's the variety? Like, think outside the box. And I think, at least for me, my 2 cents for any cEDH player is, yeah, do some variety, but also, you know, be aware of the constraints of your commander. Like, it's okay to think outside of the box, but don't just put, Dramatic Scepter in every single blue deck or Necropotence in every single black deck. No, like, understand the strengths and weaknesses of your commander and then go from your win con to your supporting cards, considering fast combo, but also considering aggro, because if you're only playing combo and someone puts a lot of stacks pieces, you're screwed. So you have to keep in mind your weaknesses also. That would be like my final piece of advice for cEDH players.
Yeah, I wanted also to bring up 2 more things. First, about the Aurelia deck, which I forgot to say. I know they weren't playing the top cEDH. I mean, Tassigor Golden Gotor was really good, but you see me winning the Aurelia game once, and actually won 2 games, but I won both matches, but they were too similar, which was hate, pummel everyone, GG. So try not to diss out the deck immediately. The other thing is about the ninjas you put on Okim and Khazur versus Ad Nauseam. People would tell you, like, oh yeah, but these ninjas also have high CMC, and if you streamline the entire deck, you could run Ad Nauseam. People could tell you that. But one thing is that I think people might not consider is that the thing that ninjas bring, and that also makes it so that they are different from Ad Nauseam, not necessarily better or worse, is they bring you a bigger mid-range and grind plan. Because if you bring them up with Khazur on the battlefield, they will gain +1/+1, and they will start being these grinding cards that are dealing damage to people and drawing you cards. And of course, they could be replaced to something that is faster, like Ad Nauseam. But the deck is already fast. So do you want to be... And this is not a question of right or wrong. It's your decision. Do you want to be faster, or do you want to be able to bring something in case there is a grind, in case it's a meta where people are more used to grinding you out, or even stats meta? Because then the ninjas will be more efficient. And I was surprised, but they are a good idea. And we didn't have grinding decks on that game, but if I was bringing a stats deck, I would have to be worried about being pummeled by these 3/3 ninjas or 3/4 ninjas.
Yeah, and drawing cards also off of them.
Yeah, and drawing at the same time. I might have to trade creatures to slow you down, but then I'm losing stack pieces, which is also good. You can't just put everything on a black and white slate and decide this is the best forever, this is the worst forever. No, if you're in a meta where 50% play stacks decks, you can't just try to run away with faster decks. It's not going to work. You're going to get stopped a lot of the times. So this is my advice, and underlining your advice, which is don't diss out things immediately. Try them out and be more daring, be more experimental. Try to have more versatile cards. Try to have surprising picks. Like, don't just be like, now everyone is running Steel Enchantment because of the white card that gives you treasures whenever a person draws a card, which gave critical mass for Steel Enchantment. Is it good in your meta, though? Is it going to be relevant? Would you not prefer to destroy enchantments and artifacts, have a card that does both? Who knows? It depends on what's going on. You can't just copy paste and that's it, because that will not make you a good player. That will not make you a critical player. And don't be too fast to diss out something because someone else told you it's bad, or someone else told you it's not going to work. You have to try it out. And my final advice for cEDH players, in general, besides being more welcome, we've gave up plenty of it, is to really not even just to be open-minded thing, just contribute to the community really about everything, and the EDH players as well. Try to be the best person you can be. Try to be mature about it. This is for both players. If even sometimes we lose our temper, sometimes we will say things that are not the best things to say. it's a play group or it's a bunch of people, apologize to them, try to be better, try to do better, try not to take things personally. If there is something that is upsetting you, don't let it pile up and then you bring it to the game. Bring it to the people themselves. Be an adult. Improve the community, the EDH and cEDH community. Make this the best Magic format or unofficial Magic format that you can help it become.
Exactly. Like I mentioned earlier, Magic the Gathering, not Magic the Separating.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for coming over. And as I mentioned, multiple times, like one of the allures that I've always had for the content you guys put out is that you can tell it's a competitive environment, but you guys are thinking outside of the box. In any case, your channel, what you guys do with your gameplay videos and how you play the game is that you're indirectly showing players, even though you're not doing deck techs or super deep how-tos or analysis on your channel, is that through the gameplay, you can tell, oh, wow, that's something that would have never occurred to me with this kind of commander, or I did not expect this commander to be able to perform in such a high power level. So I like that it also gives ideas to more casual players as well as competitive players. So even though you are playing competitive, high power matches, it's still something that everyone can get ideas from. And that's what inspired me to discuss having this podcast with you, because of the mentality you have. It's a bridging mentality. You don't have a separating mentality like a lot of other content creators do. Is that it is a community. Like we're not, cEDH versus casual, and then I find myself somewhere in between with, semi-competitive with how I brew my decks, because I take that competitive mentality and I apply it to a casual mindset, and that's where I get, my semi-competitive decks. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to prohibit myself from doing these kinds of things. And I want that to be the takeaway for all the players watching this, is that just try and have a better community, try and be more harmonious with each other, and don't be so quick to judge, don't be so quick to take things personally. So I'm glad that a lot of the advice you've given players on this podcast type episode has been very, very beneficial, and hopefully more people can adopt this and this reaches an even broader audience, and you can erase stigma from both sides, which is something I hope to accomplish.
Yeah, that's my hope as well. It's actually funny that I know we're closing, but it's funny that you brought the diversity for channel. We were actually afraid of calling ourselves cEDH because I know I have some weird ideas for what can be played or what can't be played. And we were afraid of it, but we got really nice reception from both sides. And speaking of content, the thing that also lures me from your content is that you're not afraid to taking your ideas to the fullest. And this means that you are suggesting these decks are clearly not cEDH ideas, but due to their game plan and their path to victory. But you're not afraid of putting the right cards there, of advising the right cards. And I think that is the most positive attitude that you can have. And constantly telling your viewers to not play Battlecruiser Magic like you said in your video, to make sure that they are interacting, that they are bringing solutions, to not be frustrated, and to prevent themselves from being frustrated by proactively bringing these interactions and solutions to their game plan. And this is why I also wanted to do this with you, because we discussed these and we have these points, and it's really sad to sometimes see players being so toxic to one another, when these are things that you can solve by being better yourself, by being a better person. So I'm really happy that we could do this and hopefully have people discussing it and sharing it throughout the platforms out there, so we can have, even if there's people who disagree or have even a toxic response to what we're saying, it's positive to have the possibility to expose other people to these situations, to make them see, to make them realize that we can do better, we can be better, and that this toxic person should not have the say or represent a certain bit of the community. It's the positive that really helps us move together, grow together, and become better people and players at the same time.
Yeah, definitely, because we don't pretend to be authorities on the subject, or you have to do what we say, or you think differently, so you're trash, or your opinion doesn't matter. All the contrary, the only real criticism we have is towards toxic players, and that toxicity is irrelevant to the format they're playing or their decks they're playing. We're just basically we're giving advice to players that are interested in the advice we have to give, but at the same time, there is no space whatsoever for any kind of toxicity or bigotry or unacceptance. And for people who have suffered, this kind of toxicity, it's important for them to realize that just because you can have, for example, a bad experience with a dog doesn't mean that all dogs are bad. So it's important for people to also keep in mind that, it's not the community, it's the player. So I hope that, for this takeaway, that's something that people can take into consideration.
Yeah. And, to help you close, I want to thank you for inviting me to have this dialogue with you. We've had them before, just not on the record, and I'm really happy that we can put this out there. So thank you, Kirby.
No, and thanks for coming over, and let's see how it goes from here.
Yeah. See you in the future, and maybe we can play and record some more matches.
Oh yeah, sure. Hopefully,
new sets.
Yeah, hopefully I'll play a deck without Thassa's Oracle, just to give it a little bit of a rest.
Yeah, please.
All right, so let's talk to you later, man.
Talk to you later. Thank you.
To all viewers who stayed on until the end, how do you feel about the topics discussed? I encourage everyone watching to leave comments down below. Any well thought out comments are welcome. I would like to once more thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link, that also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Barkeep Upkeep on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and thanks for listening.